السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله فإن الله تعالى مع المتقين وبعد. To be honest and frank, this is perhaps one of the most difficult khutbahs that I have ever had to give. And in fact, prior to starting this, my heart is pounding. Why? Because I do not want to say that which I will regret tomorrow. And I do not mean regret in front of any authority on this earth. I mean in front of the authority of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our responsibility to our brothers and our sisters and our deen comes before any other responsibility. And our fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should come before our fear of anyone else or anything else. And the consequences that we will face in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are more severe than the consequences we can ever face in this dunya. And for that reason, our message as Muslims is very clear. We stand with the resistance of Palestine, regardless who disagrees with us and regardless their number. Allahu mawlana wa la mawla lahum. Allahu mawlana wa la mawla lahum. Allah is our guardian. Let the populations of the earth sell the Palestinians. We will not sell them. Let the populations of the earth come against Islam. We will not fear them. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our guardian. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that we try to please. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that we fear. Therefore we try to please no one else, nor do we fear anyone else, nor do we need anyone else. And this situation that is happening now in Palestine, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Al-Quds, this situation is simply a tafriqah. It's a situation which clearly marks the ranks of the believers and the ranks of the hypocrites. Very simply, the ranks of the believers and the ranks of the hypocrites. If you stand with the atrocities being carried out against the Palestinian people, you are a munafiq. You are a munafiq. And we don't expect anything other than hypocrisy from the Western media and from the Western governments and from the Western organizations and companies and corporations. What do we expect from them? Nothing. Why? Because the state of Israel was incepted for the purpose of keeping the Muslims down. That's the reality. If you don't know your history, now is the time to go back and read it. The state of Israel was incepted by European countries after the defeat of the Ottomans, although the idea precedes the defeat of the Ottomans. It was incepted to be the friend amidst the Muslims. This issue is not an issue of justice for the Western institutions, whether media, corporations, businesses, and so on and so forth. This is an issue of ideology. That is why you are hearing today from the likes of the President of America and European prime ministers and heads of states and heads of armies, you are hearing calls for genocide. You are hearing calls for genocide. The rules of war and the laws of war apply to others. When it comes to Palestine, they are not applicable. It is internationally considered a war crime to prevent a population from water and electricity and food and that which they need to survive. Yet it is being justified in front of our very eyes in Palestine. Why? Because it's an ideological situation. Germany of all places, how ironic, who yesterday carried out the holocausts that are today being used as a justification for the genocidal behavior taking place in Palestine, Germany today are saying it's banned to hold up a Palestinian flag. You don't need to ban the Palestinian flag because Palestine is in our hearts. If you would like to remove the issue of Palestine from the Muslims, you have to remove our hearts. You have to remove our hearts because our hearts are attached to Palestine. Our hearts are attached to Al-Quds. And no matter our state, no matter our hypocrisy, there will always be a group of Muslims that will stand alongside their brothers and sisters in Palestine. Whether we are from them or not, regardless, that's our own individual struggle. That's our own individual struggle. This situation is not a situation where I can be in between. No, it's clear. It's a clear-cut situation. The state of Israel is an occupational state. The land does not belong to them. And they usurped the land. And they are carrying out atrocities and genocide against the Palestinian people. And to justify it is hypocrisy of the greatest kind. Ukraine yesterday, the resistance movements of Ukraine were praised. Palestine today, no. What's the difference? What's the difference? There's no difference. It's ideological. It's ideological. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises al-Masjid al-Aqsa and Hawl al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the land around al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam led all of the Anbiya in al-Aqsa, and the salawat that we pray were legislated in al-Aqsa, in the Isra and Mi'raj. The place is a place of significance to us. And look around us. We are white of different shades, black of different shades, brown of different shades. But that means nothing. Why? Because we are united by Iman. We are united by the causes of Islam. That's the reality. And until we are united in heart and united in action, we are going to continue to suffer. And we are going to continue to cry. And we are going to continue to see the humiliation that takes place within our ummah. And so it's upon us to make significant changes in our individual lives and our collective lives. You have groups amongst us that always cause division. We cut them out. You have groups amongst us that always like to cause inner strife. We cut them out. We put aside our theological differences. We put aside our jurisprudential differences. We put aside our political differences. And we unite as an ummah with one risala, one message, and one goal. It doesn't matter how we cross the bridge. What matters is we cross it. That's the most important thing. And this situation has to wake us up. It has to wake us up. And we have to ask questions. One of the questions, what can I do? What can I do? At the very least, I can stand clearly with my brothers and sisters in Palestine. And I can stand firmly, and I cannot allow myself to be subdued and subjugated by ideological warfare. And I can have the courage to call the Israeli occupational force an Israeli occupational force. I can have the courage to stand on the side of the Palestinian resistance. Does it mean I justify atrocities? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that I justify atrocities. But it's very easy to sit in a comfortable chair and criticize when I am not being subjugated and subjected to what a people are being subjugated and subjected to. Nelson Mandela was yesterday called a terrorist. Today he's praised as a hero. Times change. Perceptions change. But the truth remains the truth. And in a time like this, we have a responsibility to speak the truth if we are public. And if we cannot speak the truth, remain quiet. If I cannot speak the truth, keep my mouth shut, lest I say something that I will be held accountable for on Yawm al-Qiyamah in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't matter about being held accountable in this life. What matters is being held accountable in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's number one. Number two, ask myself, why are we in this situation collectively? And this question has been asked previously on this minbar and has been answered previously on this minbar. We are not in this situation due to any external strength or any external force. We are in this situation due to our love and our attachment to the dunya. That's why we're here. That's why we're in this situation. Because we are attached to and we have love for the dunya. Where does this come from? The Prophet ﷺ, he told us that the nations will come against you like they come together to eat. And the Sahaba said what? أَمِنْ قِلَّةٍ نَحْنُ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Is it because we will be small in number during those times, Ya Rasulullah? He said, La. No, you will be great in number. But what will be placed in your hearts? Al-wahan. Al-wahan. And one of the Sahaba asked, what is al-wahan, Ya Rasulullah? And he said, حُبُّ الدُّنْيَا وَكَرَاهِيَةُ الْمَوْتِ. He said, love of this life. Love of this life. And a dislike for death. Becoming attached to this place. Becoming deep-rooted in this place. Chasing after the luxuries and the glamour and the niceties and the pleasures. And if that's my goal in life, then I should feel like a hypocrite. As I cry and watch what's happening in Gaza, what happened in Sham yesterday, what happened in Iraq before, what happened in Afghanistan, what happens and what is happening in Yemen. If I'm watching these events and I'm crying whilst I'm chasing the dunya, then I should feel like a hypocrite. Why? What do those tears really mean? What do those tears really mean? I should cry for myself. And on Al Jazeera, there was a young man from Gaza. And he said, we do not need your money. He said, we do not need your unity. We do not need your dua. He said, you need your own unity. You need your own dua. Why? Because we are the ones that are besieged. We are the ones that are besieged. Besieged by our desires. Besieged by the dunya. Blinded by the pleasures of this life. That's the reality. The struggle for success in Islam has never been about numbers, has never been about capability, has never been about physical strength. No, it's always been about the state of the heart. It's always been about following the framework of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have examples of this during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. Badr, when the Sahaba were lesser in number and weaker in capacity than Quraysh, what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them success. Why? Because they followed the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ. They followed the instruction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ghazwat Uhud. Uhud, what happened? The Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam and the Sahaba were defeated. Why? Because a party from amongst the Sahaba did not follow the instruction of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Hunayn, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, when the large numbers of the Muslims, they started to rely upon their numbers, but their numbers did not serve them. Why? Because it's not the number that counts, it's the quality of the number. That's the difference. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us regarding these times, تلك الأيام نداولها بين الناس وليعلم الله الذين آمنوا منكم ويتخذ منكم شهداء. That these days, these times of struggle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rotates them between the people. Why? So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can show the people of Iman from the people of Nifaq, the people of belief from the people of hypocrisy, and to take from you shuhada, to grant some of you martyrdom. Those that are being bombarded in Gaza, and we don't need to speak about the numbers. We can see the numbers. Over 2.2 million people living in Gaza, and for the last 5 or 6 days being bombarded with tons upon tons upon tons of bombs. Women being killed, children being killed. On the way to the masjid, I was listening to the news, and the reporters in Gaza are saying, and the reporters in Palestine generally are saying, they are targeting the homes, knowing that the men are outside. The men are outside in the masajid, or protesting, or on the streets, and they're targeting the homes. Who's in the homes? The women and the children. But don't cry for them. Why? بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ شُهَدَاء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen them and selected them and blessed them and honored them to be from those who بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ enter Jannah without hisab, without reckoning. Shuhada. If we cry for ourselves. We don't cry for them. We celebrate for them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen them. And on Yawm al-Qiyamah, they have done that which they had to do. They stood in resistance for the holy land of Al-Aqsa. Whilst we chase our desires and run after the pleasures of our stomachs and private parts. So if we cry for ourselves. And if we want to see change, we have to change ourselves. That's the reality. If we want to see change, we have to start by changing ourselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us all capabilities and capacities. You have those that have high intelligence. Use your intelligence for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those who have strength in oration, speaking, use your skills for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted wealth, use your wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we realign and recalibrate our internal compasses and we start to turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we rectify our situation on the ground, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will rectify our situation globally. Allah has promised us this. Allah has promised us this. But it starts with following the framework of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, individually and collectively. Ridding ourselves of love of this life, ridding ourselves of false ideologies, filling our hearts with Islam and Iman, remembering our purpose on this earth. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created man and jinn except but to worship. What does it mean to worship? It doesn't simply mean praying 5 times a day. That's not what it means. There is a lot more to the application of Islam. When we realign ourselves and we start to work for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will see the change. During the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have granted victory to the Prophet ﷺ in one night, in one day, in a second. But He didn't. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us the struggle that is necessary in order to achieve success. The internal rectification. History shows us. We speak about the likes of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, rahimahullah ta'ala. But he was the end result of an 80-year project. And some of the ulama of Tariq, they argue that the generation who came before the generation of that 80-year project contributed to the project by planting the seeds, removing the dunya from the hearts, recalibrating people's lives with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Islam. And so as individuals, that's what we can do to start with. I'm capable of doing that. Showing my support. Being on the side of the truth. Whether it's with my mouth, with my pen, with my phone, with my voice, whatever it is. And there is no justification for a Muslim to raise the flag of Israel in support for Israel today. There's no justification. If you are asked to do so by your workplace, you have to say no. There is no justification for that. It is a clear, people would call it an apartheid state. I don't like to use that term. Why? Because that suggests that they have some right to the land. They have no right to the land. The land was taken and usurped from the Palestinians, the rightful owners of the land. And they are still waiting to go back. It is an occupational state. It is an occupational state. And if the nations that exist today exist in generations to come, they will be looking back and talking about the occupational state of Israel and the resistance movements of Palestine. Just as today, we speak about the colonial states in places like Algeria, and in places like Morocco, and in places like Egypt. And we talk about the resistance movements that stood against those colonial states. It's the same formula. The only difference is there is an ideological investment in the occupational state. And therefore, we hear the justification of its presence. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to see the truth and be a part of the people of truth. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله وحده وصلوات ربي وسلامه على أشرف الأنبياء ومن تبعه وبعد. We are not in need of an emotional response. We are not in need of an erratic response. We are in need of change. And we are in need of recalibration, individually, collectively, and to do what we can to support our brothers and sisters when we have the opportunities to support them. Whether it's protesting, whether it's speaking on radio programs, TV shows, calling up, whether it's responding online to the false accusations and the lies being spread, whether it's educating my work colleagues, whether it's educating my children. Do not belittle these acts. Do not belittle them. And we should not fall into the hole of feeling hopeless and helpless No. Why should we feel hopeless and helpless? If anything, we should feel proud and we should feel certain that change is coming. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أم حسبتم أن تدخلوا الجنة ولما يأتكم مثل الذين خلوا من قبلكم مستهم البأساء والضراء وزلزلوا حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله ألا إن نصر الله قريب. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, are you expecting to enter Jannah without being afflicted by the afflictions that afflicted those who came before you? Difficulties afflicted them, and the earth beneath them shook until they said, along with their messenger, when is the victory of Allah? Indeed, the victory of Allah is close. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, the more difficult a situation becomes, the closer the victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. That's a principle in the Quran. But what is the prerequisite? The application of the framework of Islam. If I am not praying my salawat, if I am committing haram, whether it's drinking, smoking, selling haram things, fornicating, adultery, lying, stealing, cheating, I am contributing to this situation. That's a reality. And when I am praying, when I am being honest, when I am being upright, when I am applying the framework of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my life, I am contributing to this situation positively. And so I conclude by reminding myself and reminding others to start to make a change and to start to uproot the root of dunya that has slowly attached itself to the heart. Start to uproot it and remove it and keep that place, the heart, free of the dunya and its weeds, so that on Yawm al-Qiyamah I might be from those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with, those that were able to make a difference, those that were able to contribute, even if just with a word. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد وارض اللهم عن أبي بكر وعن عمر وعن عثمان وعن علي وعن سائر الصحابة أجمعين اللهم تب علينا واعف عنا إنك أنت مجيب الدعوات اللهم انصر إخواننا المسلمين في فلسطين اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين في كل مكان يا رب العالمين اللهم كن معهم وكن على عدوك وعدونا يا مجيب الدعوات إنك أنت مولانا لا مولى لهم وأنت مولانا يا رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.
Please give me a lot of